So today, on behalf of Come Over October, I'm so pleased to be talking with Dr. Laura Catena, who is a Stanford-trained emergency room doctor and who is also, with her family, the owner of Catena Zapata Winery, a very famous winery, as we all know, in the Mendoza region of Argentina. Laura, thank you for being with us. You're one of the most admirable people in the wine industry, and it's such a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, thank you, Karen. As
Abs-
you know, I've been following you since my beginnings in wine, so it's an equal honor to be here. And I see the wine Bible in the background, which if I was sitting in front of my bookshelf, it would be in my background.
Oh, that's very kind of you. So I want to ask you, Laura, you know, I know that you have these two sides, these two very strong professional sides. On the one hand, as a doctor, and secondly, as the owner, the co-owner of a winery, an important winery. Where does your passion for wine come from, and how do you sort of reconcile those two sides?
Yes. So, it is true that especially in this moment where people are questioning, the health of drinking, they are, really standing one next to the other. My love for the vineyard, the culture I grew up in, the Mediterranean diet, my Italian heritage. I am Italian and Spanish of descent. Catena is an Italian name. And then my other family name is Zapata, which is a Spanish name. So, I grew up in this culture of wine as this very special thing that my grandfather, my great grandfather did, and my father, and running around the vineyards and playing with the dogs in the vineyard, and all this culture behind wine, and also going to Europe. I speak Italian and French, and visiting wineries. I've lived the beautiful surroundings of wine culture, which comes from the land, the vineyard, and how beautiful vineyards are, and then all this culture, the French culture of wine. I wrote a book, Malbec Mon Amour, where I talk about the history of Malbec going back to the Roman times, 2,000 years ago. How crazy is that, that our family is known for this variety that is actually 2,000 years old? I mean, it's so beautiful. So I have that on one side, and then I have my doctor side where, as a doctor, I also believe in people enjoying life because it's the little moments that make you happy. And when you think of a person with depression, for example, the first question is, what is it that gets you up every morning? Do you have a passion? Do you have a life goal? And you know that's one of the most important things to people. And the other thing that's really important is who's in your world. Who are you seeing every day? Who are you socializing with? And so for me, from the wine side, the fact that me and all the people that work in our winery and in our vineyards and in all the wineries and vineyards in the world are so passionate about this product that's ancient.
Mm.
It's almost like you're working in a museum where you're preserving the paintings and you're thinking of the artists that did them so many years ago, and you care so much about preserving them. And we have that kind of sense of pride, especially in Mendoza, where everybody's connected to wine, that we are carrying this flag for our country and showing the world these beautiful wines that we can make. So from that standpoint, I see, this kind of mission that the people around me that I work with every day at the winery, whether I'm traveling or at the winery, that care so much about this agricultural
Mm.
product. And then, on the social side, I see the aspect of wine being drunk in a meal with family, and when you have a special occasion and somebody brings a special bottle. And in my family, I have started this tradition that's a kind of an expensive tradition because I have wines from every vintage birth year of everybody in my family. And when I say
Mm.
everybody, it's the close family. It's my siblings and my nieces and nephews and the spouses of my siblings and my parents. And I have, wines from the birth years. I mean, my dad, 1939. I have some Chateau Latour 1939. And when I go to a family gathering, I bring this special bottle of a few of the members. And, some of them say, oh no, save it, Laura. I want it for later. I want it for this occasion. And I have their vintage in my cellar. And it's such a special bond. So this connection that wine brings, and then I also have my doctor side that worries about excess consumption, and that is something that I saw in the emergency department. I've seen accidents uh, related to drunk driving. I've seen the harms of excess alcohol use, and that's something that I've had to look at my whole life. And I am the first to talk about it. If I'm at a tasting, I always make sure there's big cups. I often talk about moderation. So I actually force people who are listening to me when I do a wine tasting to listen to my moderation talk. And so at the end of the tasting, I'll talk about where it comes from. I'll talk about the mountains of Mendoza. I'll talk about the tannins and, what does the wine taste like? How long will it age? How it's made? And then at the end, I say, okay, guys, now everybody has to hear my moderation talk. And I tell people, what is moderation? What does that mean? People start asking me, like, what if on Friday I drink this much? And what if I drink that? And I have an answer for everybody. Many times the answer is, I can't really tell you. All I can tell you is that this is moderation, which is, what's in the dietary guidelines, that up to 1 drink per day for a woman, it would be a 5-ounce glass of wine, and up to 2 for a man. And, I always give people tools like, if you want to drink less, just make sure that between every glass of wine, you have a glass of water. Have
Right.
wine with food, which means that because your body is processing the food and the wine, it actually processes the wine more slowly and your level goes up less. And so you really shouldn't have the harms if you're having the wine with food. So it's actually really important to drink wine with food and to drink very slowly. So the same things that we tell people about food, you should chew your food. That's how you get most of the vitamins and the good nutrients in the food, and eat it slowly. So that's where these two sides of me mix, and I'm very happy with the two sides. I like the fact that I can give advice about moderation and any possible harms, and I also like the fact that I have this 120 something year old family tradition, but that actually started in Italy, 2 generations before. So actually 200-year-old family tradition of making wine and enjoying this cultural product. And, I think I'm a good ambassador for both things.
Absolutely. And they should be two sides of the same coin. They are
Yeah,
not opposed. In
yeah.
fact, they are very much united. What your comments just now remind me of. I was interviewing Lamberto Frescobaldi, and I said something to him like, "When you drink wine," and he interrupted me. He said, "I don't drink wine." And I was shocked for a minute. I'm Frescobaldi. You don't, he said, I don't drink wine because drinking implies just unconscious, you're just drinking. He said, I drink water, but wine I taste
Mm,
because I taste it slowly. I think
mm,
about it. It's
mhm,
mindful. And I think
mhm,
everybody should taste wine
mhm.
as they're drinking it, not drink wine as they're
Yeah,
drinking it. And I thought it was
yeah,
an important
yeah.
distinction to make.
I think that's really beautiful. I have to say that when I'm tasting champagne, I'm drinking it, because if you give me a glass of champagne and I'm really happy and it's a wedding or it's a big celebration, I usually actually will have a big glass of water before, and then I'll say, okay, Laura, you're only having a tiny, tiny glass of champagne, because if you put me next to a champagne bottle, I could have 4 glasses. I love champagne so much. So, I think that's a beautiful comment from Lumberto. But I think that we don't always do that, and it's
And
okay if you're having a meal and the
yeah,
wine's really good, and but you do need to think about drinking more slowly.
yes.
That is the healthiest way. Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think it's very much, I don't mean to exclude men, but I think a lot of women do think about this ahead of time, and thinking about it ahead of time is
Yeah.
helpful. I'm going to this event. I'm going to have whatever amount. I'm going to drink water first. I'm going to pace myself. I'm going to be
Yeah.
sure to eat some
Yeah.
of the canapes.
Yes.
But let me ask you something else, Laura, because you also just referenced your community. And one of the things that I think we don't talk enough about is wine as a sustainer of rural
Yeah,
communities. I
yeah,
mean, there are almost 11,000 wineries across the United States, and those 11,000 wineries exist in rural communities. And wine, I believe, unites those rural communities in a very healthy social way that is good for the culture.
yeah. Oh, well, you should come to, well, you've been to Argentina, but I invite everybody that's listening to come to Mendoza. People are so proud of our vineyards. And our team in Mendoza is sending me photos every single day. There is one guy who manages our Adriana vineyard. That is our most famous vineyard. It's been called the Grand Cru of South America. It has, I think it's like 1,300 point wines. And Fede Uso is his name. He's the manager, and he studied agricultural engineering. He's super smart, and he manages the vineyard. There's other people that are there every day, but he, comes and is, deciding, like what cover crop we're going to do here, what time we're going to prune. Like it's a really complex vineyard because it has so many different soil types. So it's a lot of work. But he's also a great photographer and a nature lover. So he is sending me pictures of birds, of foxes, of butterflies. They say that a vineyard without spiders is not a healthy vineyard. And so he's always sending me spiders, and he's like, Laura, see, our vineyard is healthy. And I love spider photos. It's hard to get a good spider photo because of the light. And he loves this vineyard, and he has a family. He has these two younger children, and he's just a great photographer. In addition to being this incredibly talented viticulturalist, and you know, he is so happy in that place. He loves being outside in nature. And yeah, there's so many communities that work not only in the vineyard, also in the winery. I mean, you should meet my team that supervises the labels. How they're put. We have a machine that puts the label on, but we have a person that sits there to make sure that it's been put on correctly. And I'm an emergency doctor. These people are more detail oriented than I am because have this sharp eye. And, we've actually tried it for some of these things, machines, and actually people are better than machines, at really detecting any errors, like is the capsule wrong?
Mm.
And they are so proud. When I go talk to them, I say like, God, how do you do your job? Is it hard to sit here? And they're like, no, because, we really need to be paying attention to see if there's, any mistake in the way the label was put. And I was thinking, wow, that is so cool
Mm.
that each bottle of our wine, there is this person that's just making sure that everything's perfect from, the person in the vineyard, the person in the winery that's checking the temperature, and making sure that the wine's okay because the wine is a living product. You need to make sure that,
Yeah,
the sugar content is okay, that transferring to alcohol, the fermentation finishes. It's a very natural product. You can't add anything practically to wine. The OIV doesn't allow things. So it's a very natural product. And so you really have to watch it because otherwise, it could ferment incorrectly. So
right.
so since it's such a natural product, then you can't really add other than sulfites, which is also a natural product. So the people who are dedicated to this are so passionate. They're like this incredible mix of artist and scientist. Every one of my team, I feel like they're a Leonardo da Vinci. They're so smart. And then making the blend. I call our winemaker, he's been called the Messi of Argentine wine, Alejandro Vigil, because he's so famous. And did you know he has over 300,000 Instagram followers? Ale Vigil Malbec. Yeah. And so he has a great following. He loves the vineyard. But I call him our Picasso because even if he's a really good scientist, and like he knows science really well because he studied chemistry, what he has is this palette that to me is like a painter. The way he is able to see which components are going to come together and
Mm.
make the kind of wine that we're known for is really like being a Picasso. So I always call him my Picasso, and he's like, ha ha ha.
Let me ask you about that though. When I'm tasting wine with friends who are not in the business, they say, "Oh, but you have a great palate," and I
Yeah,
think No, I don't think it's like music. I think you can learn to have a great palate by paying attention, by tasting different wines from all over the world. I
Yeah.
wonder about you. Did
Yeah.
you always have a
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
palate? Do you work
So
on your palate?
So first of all, I totally agree with what you're saying. When I say that our winemaker is a Picasso, partly he's able to predict what's going to happen with a young wine. I think that is a rare talent. It
Mm,
comes from a lot of experience. It's no different than a doctor. You are able to detect diseases when you've seen somebody that had it multiple times and you've seen all the different presentations of that illness. So, he's able to taste and his palate is so developed. And so he's able to make a blend that maybe today tastes, a little too fruity, but he knows what's going to happen. So in that respect, I think that is something that you need a lot of practice, just like a painter would need a lot of practice. On the other hand, I think that people with very little wine training can detect a really good wine and can
yeah.
differentiate it from a not as good wine. And I always tell people that I will often take 2 or 3 bottles of wine to a party, where I'm the one bringing wine, so I have to take a few bottles. Other people are usually bringing food. They always ask me to bring wine. And I'll take different qualities, or I'll take something really interesting, an old vintage, and then I'll bring something that's, maybe like a normal wine, like a $20 bottle. And then I'll bring like a really expensive bottle, but, with a label that they can't tell. And the best wine flies, it's gone in the first hour. And I
Yeah.
often do the experiment of not saying anything. And this will be with people like my neighbors who don't really know, a lot about wine. Like I go to events with sommeliers like you, like people like you would know my wines. But this is people who don't know my wines. They always drink first the better wine. And so I actually think that you can develop a palate very quickly. And I do think that when you start drinking wine, it's usually easier to like white wines. And I do
Mhm.
think that it takes a little while of drinking wine to start to appreciate reds. And then it's interesting because a lot of people who've drunk for a long time then go back to whites because they're a little
Mhm.
lighter, especially winemakers. Winemakers, if they're tasting all day and you're tasting and spitting, but those tannins stay in your tongue. When you get home, you either want to not drink anything with dinner, or you might have a white wine or a sparkling, or you know um,
Right.
something that's not as tannic.
Yes, yes. It is interesting to me that, you were talking about bringing birth year wines to your family. There's nothing quite else that allows you to taste time. I mean, it's amazing to think that you're actually going to drink molecules from 1939 in
Yeah,
your father's case,
yeah,
um, that are here. They are
yeah,
here. They are in this bottle.
yeah.
And once you drink them, those molecules will be gone. But I mean, that's a head trip when you think about how
It's
remarkable it is that wine
yeah,
preserves literal molecules
yeah,
from a past time.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
and I think that's why even unconsciously, when you give someone a wine from their birth year, and it may have taken some hunting around,
yeah,
on the
yeah,
internet to find
for
that wine,
sure.
but it is a truly remarkable gift because you're giving them time.
Absolutely. Well, the 1939, I took it to Argentina because I actually was able to procure it here in the US. And I flew to Argentina with it. We've twice had it, once with my father and my husband at a restaurant when it was actually his birthday, and then another time with the family. And it was both times beautiful, the Latour. And when we had it with my husband and my father, I was looking at my father because my husband and I were sitting on one side and he was on the other side. My mom, for some reason, couldn't come. I don't remember. She was like in another province taking care of some grandkid or something. And I kept on looking at my dad and picturing him as a baby. I know this sounds really weird. And I was like, oh my God, when this wine was made, my dad was a baby. My dad was actually once a baby. My dad. And I couldn't get that thought off my head that this wine had survived in such beautiful shape, just like my dad, who is such an amazing person. He's now 80 something and he's just he's so amazing. And I just could not stop thinking of my dad having been a baby. And that was so cool. And we'll never forget. And we always talk about it with my husband and with my dad. And I still actually have a bottle left of his vintage year. I have to figure out when we're going to have it.
I am going to tell you something that I don't think you know, which is that the very first time I went to your winery, to Catena Zapata, and you were not there, but your
Mhm.
father was. And the entertainment that evening um, was to dance. Oh,
Was it like the folklore, the
no,
or
no,
tango? Was
the
it tango?
tango. Yes, I'm sorry,
Oh,
I lost that name
yeah,
for a
yeah, yeah.
second, lost that word. And then, after watching this extraordinarily incredible display of raw passion, we were invited to try dancing the tango, which of course no one wanted to do. And so
It's really hard. It's actually really hard.
your father got up and gestured to me. And so I danced with your father.
What?
And I thought, Lord, take me now. Trying to tango with your father for even 5 minutes was definitely a highlight of my wine
But my
life.
father doesn't really know how to tango. How did he even do
Well, it
it?
was good because I wouldn't have known. I thought he was pretty impressive myself.
Really, no, he's actually quite a good dancer, but I wouldn't say he knows how to tango, but he would probably deny he knows because he wouldn't want my mom to force him to dance tango. But I could see how he would have danced tango with you. I probably told him something like, this is a really important journalist and I want her to be very happy. And he probably adored you because you're so amazing, Karen. And so he said, you know what? I don't want this woman to leave Argentina without having danced tango. I love that. I'm going to tell him that. He's going to
There you go.
remember.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for talking with us. It's always a delight to talk with you, and thank you for being the person you are, the passionate woman who is a passionate doctor, a passionate wine lover, and for holding up that example to all of us that you can be both of those simultaneously. We're very grateful for
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. Yeah, doctors also want to be happy.
I
Yeah.
bet they do.
Yeah.
All right, my
Okay.
friend.
Well,
Thank you
thank
so
you,
much.
Karen. So great talking
Okay.
to you.